David Fales, welcome to the pod, my man. How are you doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. This is the pleasure's all mine, man. I'm excited to talk, and I'm excited to talk about not only your journey, but then trending topics in sports, as we often do on this podcast, to get some of your input, maybe some of the quarterback play that we've seen this year in the NFL. But I figured I'd start here. So I was researching a little bit about your background. And some of your stats, especially at San Jose State, where you lit it up the 2 years that you were there. And just for people who might not be aware with you or your game or how prolific you were as a college quarterback, I pulled out some stats from the 2012 season that you had at San Jose State. You had a 72.5% completion percentage, which was first in the country, 33 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, damn near 4,200 passing yards, which was good for sixth in the country. And your passer rating of 170 was good for third in the entire nation. And it's funny because I was on Google and I was looking you up, and there's a Bleacher Report article from, I forget the exact date, but it was from 2013, and it said that you were the most intriguing quarterback coming into the 2013 year. For that specific writer from Bleacher Report and what you could do with San Jose State ahead of guys like Johnny Manziel. But then in looking at some of the stats from your 2012 season, you had negative 139 rushing yards. I've never seen that before, so I need you to explain, and that's how we're going to start off this podcast, is how the hell, David, did you rush for negative 139 yards?
How'd you run a whole football field backwards?
Right.
If you would have went into the individual game stats, you would have saw it was Utah State. They literally sacked me like 113 yards, I think. Just that game, I got sacked 13 times. Yeah, it was brutal. They knew I was like still I understood progressions, concepts, defenses, but I was still pretty amateur in my protection. Just like being able to mic point and understand where we were hurting pressures. Like I knew, hey, if it takes two on this side and certain, like I was hot, but I didn't wasn't remiking anything. And Utah knew if they overload one side, my left tackle or right tackle would tap and they would full slide. And then as soon as they would see one of our tackles tap, they'd flip the protection and you'd get like a D end or an outside linebacker on my running back or free. So yeah, anytime we dropped back, they dialed it up. But yeah, the next year I almost had like in 2013 the same amount of stats, but didn't minus the negative rushing. I think I might have had probably under 100, but still.
I think it was seven. I could do a quick check, but you laugh. But listen, listen. If you compare it to 2012, that's 100. That's a net gain of 146. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah. We got better. Yeah, that was a fun year. I like that 2012 year was just like perfect timing for me because I'd went to UNR out of high school, and that was around like Kaepernick's junior year, kind of when Kaepernick was coming on the map, and I had committed there before my senior year. Coach Alt was the head coach. And he was like, hey, before Kaepernick, it was Jeff Rowe, which was like a pocket passer, pro style quarterback. And he's like, that's when Kaepernick leaves, that's what we want to get back to. And because I ran like a 5 flat in high school. So I was like, it wasn't like, oh, he's going to turn into Kaepernick. There was no chance. And it was my only offer, ended up was there for 3 months. And they were like, they went to the Hawaii Bowl that year, and during that week, Coach Alt brings me in. He's like, hey, you'll never play here. You're not traveling. You can stay on scholarship, but you'll never play. And then I didn't even think about it. I left and went to JUCO for 2 years. So I'd been playing for 2 years. And then when I got to San Jose, which was my only offer, I had Indiana State as well. But my only 1A offer out of JUCO. It was like perfect timing. They had a bunch of guys that had been kind of transitioning into like the team that they were with McIntyre. They got beat up their freshman year. They had like a 5-win year the year before I got there, and then they didn't have a quarterback and needed somebody to come in and get them the ball. And it wasn't like I was a rookie coming in. So it was really just perfect timing. And I had some really good coaches too. John DiFilippo, who was in the league for a while, was the guy who recruited me. And then when I got there, he ended up getting the Raiders job and left. And then Brian Lindgren came in, super smart guy, like just my perfect personality in terms of how I meshed with people. And yeah, we had a really good year. And he's at Michigan State now. And then I had Jimmy Doherty the next year, who's another super smart guy, who's now at Washington. So I've been like so fortunate to have just great coaches my entire career.
By the way, confirmed, seven rushing yards in 2013. So again, listen, listen, you improve in a vacuum, bad, but compared to 2012, very good.
Yeah.
So I mean, all jokes aside, clearly your style was more of a pocket passer. Were there any quarterbacks growing up that you looked up to or tried to model your game after?
Yeah, Drew Brees. Because I remember thinking I want to, like, it was Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and then Drew Brees. And I like my first jersey was Drew Brees when he was at the Chargers. And that was like my only jersey. I don't think I bought another one, but I was just a fan of his game. And I wasn't big or tall like Roethlisberger or Brady, so it was definitely Brees was someone I tried to model my game from. But yeah, and then as I got older, like I'm everybody in the league. For the most part, I'm trying to watch and like take things from. Some people it's just not. Some of the athletes and stuff, I'm like, oh, I'll never. That ain't in my game. I can't watch that. But yeah, those three.
What do you think made maybe kind of a dumb question here because he's so great, but what do you think made Drew Brees so special? I mean, I at least from my time watching him, it just seemed like he just had such command of the offense. Where anytime he'd walk up to the line, and it was like he knew exactly what. It kind of reminds me of Peyton Manning, where it's just like these guys who just had total command of the offense, knew exactly what the defense was doing, and was able to get into plays that ultimately gave the offense an advantage. But for you, what was so special about Breeze?
Yeah, just watching him. His like obviously I don't know when I was younger watching him, I didn't understand really like the command of the offense and his reads and how that played anything. But from a mechanical standpoint, he was so dialed in. His drops were good. His mechanics throwing wise were always good. And he's an undersized guy, so just watching his footwork and how he would go through progressions and not get happy feet, like that's a lot of stuff I watched. And then as I got in the league and I was around people who were around him, who was my line coach? Because I had Ryan Pace, who was a GM who came from the Saints, so he had been around him. And then we had that line coach. His son is a line coach for the Rams. I can't remember, but he's been around forever. I'd always pick his brain on kind of like how was he? How do you prepare? What kind of guy he was? You realize like these guys that are really good. They own the offense. Like it is essentially their offense. Like once they get to a certain part and they're installing it to the rest of the guys. Like say I wasn't around Peyton, but I was around Gase and guys. So Adam Gase came from Denver to Chicago, and that was kind of my guy that I bounced around. And it was Peyton's offense that we were running. And I would imagine it was the same thing for Breeze. Like essentially towards the middle end of his career, it was his offense. He's installing it. Like there isn't anything he hasn't seen defensively. So they're able to go like recall things so quickly. And then obviously they're gifted. They have a gift. They are so accurate. They can anticipate. And then you topple on just the amount of experience they have. Like Stafford, I was around Stafford in Detroit for an off season. Same thing. Like, dude's gifted. He is a gift. Like from one of the best throwers I've ever been around. Like you can't really teach it. And but his ability to retain information and recall it, it's like we're watching tape. He doesn't need to take notes. Like maybe if there's some wrinkle, but like in training camp when we're in just base stuff, like there isn't anything he hasn't seen, and it doesn't really matter. Like he'll react when he sees it because he's seen it all. Obviously game plan wise and stuff, there's going to be different adjustments, but they've seen so much, and they almost have like a photographic memory too. So yeah.
But when you say it's Peyton's offense or it's Drew Brees' offense, like, are they drawing up the routes? What do you specifically mean by
Yeah,
that?
like I wasn't around Breeze, but I was around Gase, who basically, like, when he was installing the offense, they're giving you the origin of where these plays came from, and everything tied back to Peyton and why Peyton called it this. Um, and Gase obviously had his wrinkle from his time before Peyton, which was like Mike Martz and like West Coast stuff. But Peyton's offense was like a very up tempo, no huddle, going fast. One code words they want to go fast to get the defense to start signaling or become somewhat vanilla. And yeah, Peyton has seen it all as well, and like super smart. But yeah, in terms of like his offense, it was, I don't know where it originated. It started in the Colts, obviously, is like when his offense came together, because I was also around Clyde Christensen, who was with him in Indianapolis. So I got like Gase's experience in Denver. Then I was in Miami, and he brought in Clyde Christensen, who was around him in Colts. I also had Brock Osweiler, who was in the room with Peyton. So I never officially met Peyton, but like knew how his football game came around, and from an offensive standpoint, at least.
Yeah, you knew him through his offense.
And Demaryius Thomas and with the Jets in 2019. So yeah, I was around a lot of guys who were close to him.
Yeah, when we talk about, the Peyton Mannings, Drew Brees, Tom Brady's of the world, clearly, they're one of ones. And it's funny because like anytime like I watch the draft and you see the comparisons with any quarterback that's taken, especially any undersized quarterback. Like I'm a 49ers fan, so like naturally I guess I have to be a Brock Purdy fan, although my hot take is that the 49ers should not pay him $60 million or whatever the market value, whatever his market value might be. We can get into that later. But anyways, like any undersized guy coming out of college, it's like the comparison's always Drew Brees, just because that was true. But like when you talk about not even just the accuracy, but the mechanics and some of the intangibles that he had, that's almost impossible to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have like the personality, right? Like it's not like Baker. Baker, I think, probably had that comparison too, but Baker is a gunslinger, like it's and he's that way from a personality standpoint. I don't know him, but just seeing him in the media and stuff, it's not the same. He's not Drew Brees. He's like, so yeah, definitely a different mindset and personality standpoint to just like being a Drew Brees versus the physical aspect.
Yeah. David, going back to your own journey of football here. So when I was, again, reading up on kind of how you got to where you ended up being in the NFL, I saw a lot of similar, and you might laugh at this, I saw a lot of similarities between your journey and then Aaron Rodgers' journey to football. Not just because you guys are both from the Bay Area, from California, but Aaron Rodgers, similar to yourself, came out of high school, wasn't heavily recruited, ended up going to a junior college where by some luck, there was a guy who was scouting, actually one of the tight ends on Rodgers' JUCO team at the time from Cal, ends up seeing Rodgers. He's like, hey, this kid might have something. He gets to Cal, and then the rest is history. Your route is little similar to that, right? Not heavily recruited out of high school. You go to Nevada first, but then you go to a JUCO, and then you come back to San Jose State where you flourish and end up going into the NFL. Did you ever, I guess, draw those similarities between you and Rodgers? Did you ever think about Rodgers? Did you ever look at him like a role model in any way?
No, yeah, just watch, like once I was in the league, I'm like, this guy's different. He's like one of those guys where it's like, I can't watch him because he defies science and how he like generates power with the like his legs and his lower body. But like, no, not really. Cause there's just, when you go through on that journey, from D1 to JUCO back to D1, like you just see so many guys that kind of do the same thing, whether they're like, they don't make it to the league that often, but there's just in general, like there's so many good players that whether they just don't get an opportunity, right? Like timing doesn't work out for them. That happens in the league all the time too. Like there's so many good players that you're around that just don't get a chance, right? Like there's only so much opportunity. And then you see some guys who maybe, and you think aren't as gifted, but because the whole room just got hurt, they get an opportunity and they do decent, right? Like they do enough to be like, okay, he can manage a game. Like, well, we know he can manage a game. And I'm just like, you're like, how the hell does this guy keep getting a chance? But yeah, I don't know. So no, long story short, I never compared. It's not like, oh, me and Aaron get the same story, but yeah, there's a lot of guys I feel like they do. Even like Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen was trying to get into San Jose State and nobody responded to him. It's crazy. I'm pretty sure it was my coach Ron Carragher. I'm like that they didn't think he was good enough. That's the thing too. There's like people scouting and recruiting quarterbacks are horrible. I think I don't think people from a quarterback position understand how to evaluate it correctly. Not everybody. I've known a lot of good coaches, but just like how, like Josh, like how do you not give that guy a chance? I guarantee he was probably 6'5", 230 in JUCO. And how do you say, yeah, I'm not going to give him a chance? You know, and it wasn't just, it was a lot of people who didn't. So that's always interesting to me. And I feel like it's harder. I also think it's harder to, like, from college to high school, like how do you forecast where a kid is going to end up? You know, because there's such a, like, so many kids, especially in the trenches, tight ends, linemen. You might find a 230 lineman, you know, but like you just recruited him to a small 1A school and he's going to turn into a 280 or something. I just, maybe not that extreme, but there's just a larger gap in terms of their development process versus like NFL, college to NFL. I don't know. Yeah, I'm always kind of critical of the recruiting, like, especially like the bigger size guys. And maybe this is just because I was one of the smaller guys. I'm like, of course this guy's going to be a first round pick. Like you can bet your job on the, and not even first round picks, but even just whatever your projection of him is going to be. If he's 6'5", 240, like he's going to be a top guy. I'm like, yeah, you could bet your family on that. And if he sucks, like, hey, he had everything. I don't know what happened. It was something else. He had the height, the size, the strength. Yeah, I kind of going on a tangent, and I'm not really exactly sure where I'm taking this, but the recruiting quarterbacks it's a skill.
Well, no, this is good. I'm glad you brought this up because one of the topics I wanted to get into today was drafting quarterbacks and how insanely difficult it is, and how year in, year out. I mean, again, not to bring up my guy Brock, even though I wouldn't pay him. He's still my guy, still the quarterback of my team, the 49ers. But Brock Purdy, last pick in the draft. Like, how does that happen? I get it. He maybe didn't have the the athletic skill set that you would want and the size, but I mean, his as a pure thrower of the football, again, maybe doesn't have the arm strength, but has a lot of the intangibles that you would look for in a quarterback, and he ends up being the last pick of the draft. And then, I mean, Brock Osweiler is a guy that I kept thinking of as you were talking about size, where a guy that you played with that seemingly had everything. He had the size, he had the arm strength, but just could never piece it together. And so it's like year in and year out, we try to project these guys. I mean, even coming up next year, Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, like all these guys that we're trying to project and understand, like, what are they going to look like in the NFL? It kind of just ends up being a crapshoot. So I'm curious, like, from your perspective, you were obviously a quarterback. Like, what would you, if you were scouting these guys and you were in charge of a team, what would you look for when drafting a quarterback?
Yeah, I would have to get really dialed in. I would dive deep into the personality side, because like everyone looks at the tangibles. Like, okay, we can all agree if you're in the top 15 quarterbacks, like they're all good. Anybody who makes it to the league, they can all spin it. Like it's now in the details. And how do you evaluate that? Like, and a lot of times I think they mess up is like the personality side. It's like, this guy wasn't a fit. He wasn't ready to be a leader of a team. And I think it also, the other half, and I would legit say half, is where are they going? You look like, and not the Browns now, but the Browns like probably like 10 years ago, anybody who's going there you were going there to die. I don't care who you were. Pat Mahomes goes there 8 years ago. We're not talking about Pat Mahomes. Like, we would all think he's good. We would think like Deshaun Watson. Like, Deshaun Watson is a super talented guy, but like from a personality standpoint, he's not ready. I don't think he's shown that he's able to to get that. And I haven't been around, but like there's just so many guys that are extremely talented that just aren't a fit. And I think half of that is what organization are they going to? Like I look at like Andy Reid, like I think a lot of quarterbacks that go to Andy Reid are going to probably do well because he's done his homework. He understands the position. He understands what it takes, what you need around that person to be successful. And he's not going to throw you in the fire immediately. Like, I think a lot of people who go play for Shanahan are going to do well. You're going to do well if you play there. Because he takes care of you. You're not going to be dropped back. The run game is going to be tied in with the play action and pass. He knows he's going to put people around you because it's not you're not going to be able to win it without him. He just does I think a lot, and this is not to take away from Brock Purdy because I think everyone is really good. Not everyone, but there's a lot of quarterbacks are really good and would have decent success. With Shanahan, if you are a NFL quality quarterback, I think he would be able to navigate. He would put you in positions to have success. He'd probably be able to keep you not put you in positions he knows you're not going to be able to have success in. I think I think it's a big factor of where they're going. I would dive deeper into the personality side of things just to see like what is this guy about? Like does he get some money and like fuck off after he gets money and not care about, what's going on and being able to represent an organization. And it would just have to be a fit from an offensive style. But I think there's like a few guys or a few coaches that do it right. And I like the ones that off the top of my head are like, Andy Reid, Shanahan. I like when Sam Darnold went to Minnesota, I was like, he's going to ball there. He's got a great coach and Josh McCown's there. And like anybody who's been around Sam knows the dude's freak talented. But playing ball in the league is hard if you don't got people around you and they're not understanding your strengths from just like a personality standpoint and what you're able to retain and then putting you in a position because it's just hard. And that's where I think like the greats like Stafford, like that dude's elite because he's going to go out there and give you a chance kind of probably regardless of what's around you. Like Brady, similar, like he's made a lot of people around him better. But he also had a lot of ballers around him for a majority of his career. But again, he's one of the greats just because how consistently he's able to do it regardless of who's out there with him. But yeah, like it's multifaceted, I would say. Like it's not just, hey, is this guy going to be good in the league? I think it depends. Are we ready to support this guy in the league?
Well, and that's always been one of my qualms with a lot of the discourse that you see in sports media, especially nowadays in the world of hot takes and the culture of just putting out clips that go viral. But people seemingly always want to either attribute success or failure to one person. And it's not just an NFL thing. It's not just a football thing. It is across all sports. Yeah. And like we see it with head coaches are like the main culprits of this. Like, unfortunately, they usually get the short end of the stick when a team's playing bad. It's like, it's all on the head coach. Like right now, not to make this a 49ers podcast, but Niners not doing too hot. It's all on Shanahan. Like he is the sole reason why the 49ers aren't, playing up to their standard. But that's never the case. It's also never the case that if a team's doing really well, that's all because of the quarterback. Or if a certain offense is performing above expectations, it's all because of, quarterback X is playing at a very high level. It takes so many pieces around him, just as you eloquently put. There's so many different moving pieces that need to come together at the right time for that to actually flourish into what you're seeing on the field. And we had DeShone Kizer on the podcast, and you mentioned Cleveland 10 years ago, and like his name immediately popped into my head. Talk about a guy that was insanely talented out of Notre Dame, gets drafted by the Browns, and just was never amounted to what he could have been in the NFL. And he'll never directly say this, but I think a big part of it is because he went to that organization in that time when the Browns were, let's just be brutally honest, a dumpster fire. Like it was terrible. If you read some of the reports and stuff that was coming out during that time, it was bad. And so again, to your point, there's so many of those guys where you think, damn, if DeShone Kizer went to a Kyle Shanahan or an Andy Reid, like what could have he been, right? Like if Sam Darnold had had been, with Minnesota, and with Kevin O'Connell from the start, like what could he have been? What could have, imagine Sam Darnold his rookie year with Kevin O'Connell with that amount of confidence, right? Like the amount of confidence that would have been instilled in him from the start. Like Sam Darnold might be a top 5 quarterback in the league by now.
No, he's a baller. Yeah, he's a baller. And yeah, I agree. I mean, like the Browns thing. How many guys have gone there and their careers died? Like, and they think, and they just think Browns have a problem drafting. I'm like, it's way bigger than that. I mean, they're not that much bigger, but like, look at everything around them. They're drafting these guys, expecting them to come create a miracle. Yeah, so you got like, I think like Shanahan, he's had success with quarterbacks like majority of his career. Andy Reid, same thing. I can't think of anybody else, but there's McVay. Like when Stafford went to the Rams, I was like, I was telling him, like, my close friends and my wife, I'm like, they might win the Super Bowl. Because not to discredit Goff, but for whatever reason, it wasn't clicking. But when you get a 0.01% of the league of like quarterbacks within the league, like Stafford is that guy. Like he's probably, of all guys I've been around and seen in person, like I'm taking him with 2 minutes left in the game and we need a score. Super clutch, and you put him around McVay and Cooper Kupp, and I think they had Odell, and they had some other a solid defense. Like I'm putting my money on him, a healthy him, because he definitely is getting older and banged up.
Yeah, it was the perfect marriage, and it was terrible for every single 49ers fans because I hate the Rams. But I mean, it was not a fun Super Bowl. I remember watching that Super Bowl live. I was in LA at the time, and we were at this bar, and I was rooting so hard for my boy Joey B. But like you said, it was McVay is offensive mastermind, and like, isn't it funny? I don't know if you've seen like the NBC graphic. They do it. I swear to God, they do it every Sunday night. Like anytime McVay, Shanahan, McDaniel, like any head coach from like the Shanahan tree is playing, they always put up that picture of 2013 of the Redskins when Shanahan was the OC with McDaniel and McVay and all these guys. Like, I was like, listen, guys, like it was cool the first time. Like by the 10th time, I think we all get it. Like we get the Shanahan tree. Like we understand that these guys, LaFleur, it's like every single Sunday night, I swear to God.
Yeah. I've seen it. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, so like being able to sit on the couch and watch like a quarter of a game is a fight.
Tough.
Yeah, I'm fighting with like Bluey or something.
Thomas the Train. I don't know if that's still a thing. That used to be a thing back when I was Thomas the Train Man. I'd watch the crap out of that cartoon.
They don't know that one. It's like Bluey. Bluey's a hit right now. I don't know.
Bluey.
Yeah. Trying to get him in some like other Avengers or Marvel movies as long as they're not too scary.
Yeah. All right, so David, back to your journey. So again, you go to Nevada, doesn't work out. You go to JUCO for 2 years. You then come to San Jose State, which they call the Harvard of Silicon Valley. I don't know if you knew that. Nobody calls it that. It's not a thing.
It's like, not oh, really? Thing. Wow. Yeah.
Not a thing. But you go to San Jose State, which candidly then and even now, like San Jose State, not a top football program in the country by any means. I think you were the first quarterback in, was it 26 years, I think, that was selected in the draft from San Jose State. You were the 4th quarterback ever in San Jose State history to be selected in the draft. So again, not a school known for pushing out quarterback talent. But you go there and you excel, man. I mean, we went over your 2012 stats. 2013 was very similar. And coming into the 2013 year, I was reading some articles. A lot of people were projecting you to be a first-round pick. You end up going in the sixth round. Why do you think there was such a discrepancy between what you were projected to be at the start of 2013 and then where you ended up going in the draft?
Uh, I think there were some guy like Bortles wasn't on the map my junior year, and then he had like a huge year my senior year. There was a lot of other kind of guys that popped up too. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't really a name. Logan Thomas wasn't really a name. Tom Savage. Um, but that always happens. You know, there's guys you didn't hear the year before, and then they kind of have a really good year. I think I didn't. I've never been like you're gonna see me in person and be like, oh, this guy a kicker. Like now, like since I've been done, I've been lifting hard and I look like a linebacker. But like when I was playing, wasn't overwhelming from a physical standpoint in any sense, and especially even in the NFL, like when I was at the Senior Bowl with Garoppolo and Carr, and those guys can spin it. And I just didn't have a good showing then either. Um, I was sick. That kind of I think that hurt me a little bit. I don't know. I've never done well. Like what made me good is not like this guy just dominates physically. You know, like I'm a gamer. Like there's a switch that comes on, and like I'll watch tape, and I'm like I have no idea how I made some of these throws. I'm super. I would say I'm pretty smart and able to anticipate and can prepare really well. And then I just like, and once a game happens, I let it rip. And it's just hard to, it's hard to measure that, you know, and to bet to bet your organization on that. And what's weird, like my agent, I had a big agent that I went with, Athletes First, and they were telling me second, third round. Like Minnesota was really interested. They came and flew out and worked me out. Arizona was another one that was coming up. Then the second, third round, it's like third, fourth, and then fell like to the Bears, and which I was super grateful to go there because Matt Kavanaugh, like 2 weeks or a week before the draft, just like came and worked me out, and he loved me. He's like, I had a second round grade on you. I'm like, damn, that's sick. But it just because just coming from Matt Kavanaugh, who was a backup to Joe Montana, played in the league for 16 years, coached for 16 years, like this again on the list, on my top 10 list of like good coaches who influenced my career and who I respect. It was cool to be around him and to just hear that from him. But yeah, why I fell. I don't think I did it. I had a great showing at the Senior Bowl. I don't think I overwhelmed anybody at the combine compared to everybody else in that class, because I had a decent class. Like it was Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, and there was all that hype around him. I had Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, and then like after that it was like Tom Savage, who had a hose, Logan Thomas, who's played in the league as a tight end forever, was a freak, and then AJ McCarron, Aaron Murray. So yeah, I just I yeah didn't show well in the Senior Bowl or combine. Pro day had a solid pro day.
Speaking of blacking out during games, I want to read you a quote from your Twitter. You said, during my playing days, I used to say that there were two versions of me. There was game day me, and then the guy that was terrified during the week to perform on game day. Who showed up was based on the stories I was replaying in my mind. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. I started working with quarterbacks, and I was just like, I kind of this last off season, and just it causes you to kind of reflect on how you became the quarterback and just person you were, and being able to communicate that to other people, because sometimes it's like you know, you just know it's who you are, but being able to transfer that to somebody else, kind of that's what prompted that, was just working with other quarterbacks, and I think a lot of guys are structured that way, at least high performing people in the NFL. Not all, but guys that have done, like that I've connected with, like there's a version of you Monday through Friday or whenever you are, where you're like anxious, like how am I gonna show up and prepare and perform for my team like the way that I need to in order for us to win. And even like comparing, like how am I gonna do what I did last week? I just threw for like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like that's the standard, you know, that's the expectation for me moving forward. Like how am I gonna do that? And that anxiety and fear of not being able to perform is what made me train hard during the week, what made me do everything that nobody wants to do. And it's not healthy because it kind of transfers over into real life too, and it's not a good way to be all the time, especially when you don't necessarily have a game on Saturday to prove to yourself that you are who you think you are, or you are good, you know, because you're kind of, that was always my uh I guess I'm slipping the word slipping, but basically like confirming that I am good. I am good enough. And when you don't have that, it's not a good way to be. You kind of live in anxious and you're always chasing something. But I know a lot of guys are that way, and you kind of have to, especially guys in the league or guys just high performers in general. So, yeah, that's kind of where that was. I always say there's just two versions of myself. The guy who's terrified he's not gonna be able to do it, and then the guy once he was been terrified all week, and there's like no doubt, like you're running through the mind like, did I miss anything? And then you get to, it's like, there's no way, like I'm going to fucking put on a show today. Like these people are here to see me, and I'm like, that's the thing. I would go, I'm like, I don't care who you're here for. You're here you're watching me tonight, and like that's how I would walk in, and that swagger and confidence is like a big part of how I could just like let it rip and get into the flow. But I don't think I would be that way if I hadn't been terrified on Monday, unsure of what I'm going to do, watching all the tape, making sure I'm checking all the boxes. But
so is it almost, because I've always heard like, because people struggle with performance anxiety in many areas of life. Like public speaking is a big one for a lot of people where they get terrified of public speaking. And I've heard the advice of, just prepare to the point where like you almost drive yourself crazy with how much you prepare and how, memorized your speech is and could be and all this stuff. And I've always heard preparation is the thing that solves performance anxiety. Was that the case in your experience?
definitely, definitely. But you still, even with that, like, yes, you got to make sure you're doing everything to prepare and not just saying you are. Like, you got to really do it, because you don't want to be like, eventually you have to get to a point where like, okay, no, I'm good, right? Like I did it. And sometimes it's hard, you don't want to keep being that way and thinking like, oh, have I prepared enough? What is enough? Is there enough? And I think you get in football, regardless of where you are, you get trained, like if you do perform well, you do have to flip that switch and be like, I don't care, like I'm gonna make it happen. And for me, like my fears were so unrealistic. I like the movie Replacement, when they're in the room and they're talking about like, what's your greatest fear and stuff, and he says quicksand, like that. I was like, every football player I think can kind of relate to that, because that was mine. Like the stories I was telling myself that I was afraid was going to happen. It was like, I'm going to have this feeling that I don't know how to throw the ball, that I'm going to see like 20 guys on the field, I'm not going to be able to complete a ball, I'm going to throw 4 picks. Like, I wasn't saying those words, but what I was visualizing is like that, the feeling of not being able to throw, the feeling of not being able to complete a ball. You're going to get up against Stanford or BYU, and I'm like, I'm about to play like Kyle Van Noy. Like, this guy's going to rip my face off. I ain't going to pass off. And then you're just like, I'm probably going to be able to check it down a few times. Like, I'll get it going. When I start really dissecting what I'm afraid of, and is it real? No, probably not. A lot of things that I think we're afraid of, if you wrote it out, it's like probably not going to happen. Like public speaking, what are you afraid of? Like sounding dumb, sounding stupid. Like the people, maybe they think you sound stupid, but you'll probably be fine. Like if you're up there talking, it's probably for a reason. Like just tell your story, whatever it is. Like it's probably not really fully realistic, your fear of what you're afraid of happening. So
that's a good way to put it, man. And even if people do think you're stupid with the public speaking example, they'll probably forget about it in like 30 seconds because people are too focused on themselves. And like,
just think of you. It's like when you hear somebody say something like, that wasn't good. It's like, and you're done within 30 seconds.
You move on. Yeah. Dude, I get that way all the time with podcasting. Cause I'm always like, especially in the beginning. Now I'm like, I say whatever and like, I don't care. But like, especially in the beginning, I was like, speaking of fears, like irrational fears, I was like, dang, like if I say the wrong word, if I ask this question but mess up one word, like I probably can't even release the podcast. Like let alone, like I'm done. Like, you know, that's it. But then you like then you like start to listen to like other podcasts, and you're like, oh, like they also sometimes mess up, or like they maybe also sometimes lose their train of thought, and it's fine because like I heard someone say this once. I don't know if you listened to Modern Wisdom by Chris Williamson.
Yeah, not all of them, but like if he has a guest on that I'm interested in, I do. Yeah.
Same thing. So I feel like that's most podcasts, to be honest. It's like, but he was talking about like what makes a podcast great. And like, he started talking about how in the beginning, he always thought it was like it was what made a podcast great was tied to the questions that the host would ask, and how, you know, deep the questions were, you know, basically everything revolved around the questions. But he found out that it was more of like, I think, what was it? He called it like a vibe. Like a good podcast is predicated on like how good of a vibe you can create, not only with your guests, but then also with the listener. And so he said, he was like, that's what I strive for now, is to create this like atmosphere and this vibe it's, you know, good vibes, and we're having a good conversation, and it's like two friends talking, and it's not super scripted, like all this stuff. And it's like damn, that's kind of true. Because like when I first started out, I was like, all right, I need to research everything about David, and like I need to know like 10 years ago what his favorite color was, so that when he comes on, I can ask David like, hey man, like is your favorite color still blue? And then he'd be like, wow, you really did your research. And that might be good, but at the end of the day, the listener doesn't necessarily care or notice that to the extent that I think they do, if that makes any sense. So
No,
I don't know, man. It's all about the vibes.
Yeah, I agree. I just being guests on podcasts and then listening to podcasts and then like the thought of thinking about creating my own. It's like when I listen to like Joe Rogan, I listen to Chris Williamson, I listen to some other ones, and like what I think like Chris and Joe do well is like that vibe, but they're just so authentic, right? Like they get quality people on that can have a really good conversation and are typically like an expertise in whatever field, and then he's just curious, right? He's like asking genuine questions, but it's just very authentic, which I think is what I'm attracted to. At least like some of the, because Joe Rogan will have like some of his buddies on, and I don't listen to those as much, but it seems like a lot of his guests are buddies for how long he's been doing it. But he just does a good job of holding a conversation and like knowing enough about enough, but not necessarily like an expert in everything.
Right. Yeah, man. It's because if you know too much about a guest, like I ran into this issue where like if you know too much about someone, then it's not really a good listening experience for the listener, because you start asking questions that like are a little too detailed and don't really connect with the overall. Like if I start asking you like, all right, man, can you take us back to like week 5 at San Jose State versus like, and it might have been like a crazy game, and maybe that's why I want to bring it up. But if it's just like you brought up Utah State, right, and getting sacked whatever 20 times, like, right, like that's a game that we could maybe talk about. But like if we're talking about like week 5 whatever, and it's like a normal game, it's like, well, do people really want to, you know, listen to that? Like, do they want to hear? And maybe they do, and that's the cool thing about podcasting is like you get this immediate feedback from your audience, where it's like, hey, we liked when you did this. We didn't really like the whole week 5, you know, versus whatever Stanford, right? Like, so that's the cool part, is like you get immediate feedback, and then you just iterate and you get better, and you just go from there.
No, I agree.
It's but it's tough. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who do podcasts and who do them at the high level. I mean, it's not an easy, like I always thought, not to make this podcast about podcasting, but like I always thought it was like, oh yeah, you just ask questions, or you just like talk to people. But then like once you start getting into like the nitty gritty of it, it's like, can you hold a conversation? Can you ask follow-up questions? Like, can you like one of the things that I learned was like, I'm always looking at my guests to see like, are they comfortable? Like, are they having a good time? Like, what's their vibe? Like, do they seem bored? Like, do I need to, you know, change it up? Like, it's a whole thing, man. But it's cool. Like we talked about before we started recording, you get to network with a lot of cool people at the end of the day, which makes it great. So,
Yeah, I think like I'm in sales right now, and it forces you to truly listen,
yeah,
which is sometimes when you don't, like in sales, sometimes you're listening for something specific to respond to some to the way you want to respond, and like when you're actually having like a really good conversation, you're just like so locked in and listening to that person, and having like a secondary question based on what they're saying. You didn't ask a question to tear up your next question. You're just like, you're in it. um which is something I think I think I've been a decent communicator in just being a quarterback, but in sales, like just like listening better, instead of trying to sell something, which like we're all in sales, and once I'm in it, you're always selling yourself. I've been selling myself in football for forever. I'm selling like with my wife, I'm trying to do certain things or get stuff done. Like I'm always selling. um so not necessarily listening as much.
I was about to ask. We should ask your wife how your listening skills are, because I don't know if she would give you a a good grade.
Yeah, probably not.
Love it, dude. Yeah, I mean, just having conversation. I mean, like I said, there's been plenty of times during the podcast where I'm like having a conversation with someone and I like black out. You talk about blacking out in a football game. Like I black out during podcasts sometimes. I'm like, wait, what were we talking about again? Like, where were we going with this? But it's an art, man. It really is. And it's a lot tougher than people make it seem out to be.
Yeah,
Because you also have to balance. Like, you want to be respectful of your guest time. You also want to have like a natural conversation, but then you also want to balance that with like questions that you have or that you think might land with an audience. So like you're trying to balance all those things within like an hour and a half, and it's like you're constantly playing this game of, do I change the subject? Do we keep going? Like,
yeah. Especially with the time you have.
right.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, speaking of switching subjects, so looking at your NFL career, man, when I think of like NFL careers, like I think of, again, picking on the Niners here, like a Debo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, like even a Brock Purdy, right? George Kittle, like all these guys who are in the league for 10 years, who have signed multiple contracts, who stay with one team. Like I see those guys and I think that is the norm. And then I have to always remind myself that the NFL stands for not for long, and that it is a very competitive league. The average career length in the NFL is 3 years. You have constant, I mean, there's so many guys who get signed to practice squads, who get cut from practice squads. And it's a revolving door. Your career, you start with the Bears in 2014. Then you go to the Ravens in 16. You go to the Dolphins in 17 and 18. You go to the Lions in 19 for a little bit. And then you end up with the Jets in the 1920 season. So you kind of experienced that, revolving door where you're constantly getting cut or traded or signed by another team. Can you just give us perspective on what that's actually like? Because I see the team names and I see the years, but I don't understand the experience that you went through and getting cut and then getting signed by other teams, and how that all fits together.
Yeah. No, it's tough, especially when like your entire career you're with one team and that's your team. Not so much anymore with the portal and NIL, but when I was, it's like I'm not. This is my team for at least the next couple years. And then I got into the NFL, and the first time I was cut, I was mad. I remember being like, I am out of here. I was like, was it the first time? I'm like, yeah, it was. Cause I hurt my shoulder. I got an AC joint the last preseason game. But did well enough. They kept me on the 53, the first week, and then everyone got hurt. Like, now you can have a third quarterback, which I wish I would have loved. That would have been great. Probably would have been on the 53 my first couple years, which I got some enough to get a credit a year. But so everyone gets hurt my week 1. They end up cutting me the Friday before week 2 when they were coming back to the new Niner Stadium for it was the first home game in the Niner Stadium, like back, which is home for me. And they cut me, and I don't travel, and I was so pissed. I ended up flying home. I was like, went out with my brother. Was mad. Ended up realizing, like, oh, I'm probably coming back on practice squad, like, and but they thought I was going to get claimed. When they cut me, they thought I was going to get claimed by like the Niners, because I had some other teams that were interested, and ended up not happening. And I also ended up like signing healthy, because they could have gave me like an injury settlement with my shoulder. But I wanted to be with the Bears, and Mark Trestman was my guy, Matt Cavanaugh too. It seemed like they were pretty invested in me, and ended up like staying on practice squad that year. And then the Patriots were trying to claim me at the end of the year, so they bumped me up back to the 53 the last couple weeks. So then I got, which was awesome, because if you get 3 weeks, all you need is 3 weeks on the 53 to get a credited year to go towards your retirement benefits with the NFL, like your pension, 401k, all that stuff. So it was good. I got a year. And then my second year I was weird, because I ended up getting surgery. Like, my shoulder didn't get better. The doctors and stuff was like, no, it's like a grade 1 or something. It wasn't bad, and they thought it was gonna get better, but it never got better. It hurt. So I ended up getting Mumford surgery, and then this could be another. I don't want to waste too much time, but like the week before training camp my second year, I couldn't pee. Like, I had scar tissue back by my bladder, and all of a sudden I was going to the bathroom, look down, can't pee a drop. And I had like some scar tissue issues back when I was little, but then it kind of went away and was fine. But something happened, and like couldn't pee a drop, and ended up had to get surgery. I got like 6 surgeries, but the first surgery, when I was going in, he was like, hey, I was like, am I going to be okay to go to training camp a week from now? And he said, yeah, they were just going to like cut the scar tissue. It'll heal up in a week. And I had a catheter for a couple days after, but as I went home and I had a catheter, I was still doing like some shoulder rehab. And all of a sudden I looked down, and I'm standing in the middle of a puddle of blood. So I'm like death grip down here, getting the ambulance, got back to the hospital, and he nicked an artery when he went back there. So I end up, I was peeing blood for like a month. And I probably had like 4 or 5 surgeries that training camp. The Bears told everybody I was sick, because like, what are you going to tell him? Like, he's bleeding, he's pissing blood, like he's bleeding from his dick. Like, what are you gonna? So they just told him I was sick, and so I didn't get healthy until week 2 of the preseason, but I hadn't done much, like I was pretty weak, like hadn't taken any reps or anything. Didn't play a lot of, I think I got in like a series for preseason 3, and then preseason 4, they brought in Gase. This was Gase's first year, that my second year. So John Fox came from Denver, brought in Adam Gase, brought in Dow Loggins, and so they brought Zach Dysert, who was his practice squad guy in Denver, and then Cutler and Dow told me like, hey, they're gonna cut you. Like, this is your last game, which I was like so super grateful they told me, because I was pretty close with Cutler, just being with him the year before. And he just wanted to like let me know to say, hey, let it rip. Like, this might be it. And I balled out. I like pulled all. I had like we had the game plan, and then I had my separate game plan of what I was gonna do. Because typically in preseason you don't pull out any checks or audibles or anything. But I'm like, I'm doing it all. And Cleveland, they were like running some cover 0 in preseason, which like sucks, especially versus preseason, because you're playing with guys who haven't all played a lot together and aren't making adjustments like that. So end up playing really well. They keep me on the 53. End up getting put on the practice squad for a couple weeks, and then Baltimore, the Niners want to claim me again. And then I told Chicago, I'm like, hey, I'm going to the Niners unless you make me the 2. And they ended up cutting Jimmy, which Jimmy is my guy, but made me the 2 that year. And then yeah, I got a cut again in Chicago. It's not fun getting cut. But after a while, you can kind of see it. And I was around Gase and Dow Loggins a lot of my career, and so I was just like, dude, just tell me, like, do we have to really wait till the day? And I gotta like, can you just give me a heads up? Like we've been doing this the last 4 years. Like, just give me heads up. But he took care of me. 17, I got cut, was gone for a month, ended up bringing me back, played at the end of that year. In 2017, though, they brought me back for a week. This is when Cutler also got signed to the Dolphins after Tannehill hurt his knee. They cut me, said, hey, just stay ready. Something's going to happen. We'll sign you back. They ended up signing me back. And then they wanted to cut me after just coming back for a week and make me a coach. And I was like, it was the weirdest thing ever. I'm like, I don't even want to be a coach. But I was just like, I had done so well on their tests. Gosh, this is gonna make me mad because I gotta shout this guy out, Scott Goldman. What is the name of this thing? This personality test, not personality test, but like a performance test. AIQ, not the AIQ. Like a lot of teams use this AIQ test, and Gase kind of swore by it. And it tests so many things, like your spatial awareness, recall, manipulation and rotation. I have my test here: reaction time, navigation, multiple target search. And I had at that time like one of the top scorers. I think like Baker Mayfield might have got a little bit higher than me, but so I was like a one of, I think Gase liked me half because of that. But yeah, I didn't want to be a coach, and I ended up telling Gase, like, yeah, I'm not, like, if you're gonna cut me, just cut me. I'm not gonna do a coach. He's like, oh, I thought you wanted to be a coach. Like, just continue as usual. Let you know what we're gonna do. And they ended up keeping me on the team the rest of the year because they were gonna cut me, pay me like my $40K for the week, and then that was gonna be what I got paid for the rest of the year. And this was like in October, so I would have missed out on like a shit ton of money. And then I ended up playing 18, 19, and part of 20. So it was like over $1 million decision. To tell them no, like, cut me, and they didn't cut me. I ended up playing in 2017 and played decent enough at the end of that they brought me back in 2018, stayed on the 53 that entire year, which that was nice. It's hard. It's hard when you go from college to the NFL because like you're the guy, you know you're never gonna get cut, and then all of a sudden, and I was never a great practice player. Like I could not flip that switch in practice. Like, it is very hard for me. How I showed up in games was way different than how I performed in practices. And I think that hurt me in the NFL. Because I would always get to the point where like I'm getting cut, and then I would ball out. Like I would have some crazy preseason game that I would do well in numbers wise, and then yeah, so it's hard for guys, I think, because you're always kind of on edge even during the week in practice, like hoping you don't get cut.
Just to give people more context, I wrote this down because it was crazy to me, and so I'm hoping that this will give people just a little more insight into what it's actually like to be cut and signed and cut and signed. And so, 2016, September 6th, 2016, you're signed to the Ravens practice squad. You're released on November 8th. Then you're re-signed 2 days later, and then you're released again on November 15th, and then you're re-signed to the practice squad again on November 19th. So in a span of, what is that, a month and a half, you were signed and released, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a month and a half.
Those they were telling me they just needed a roster spot, and they had told me like, hey, you're gonna be on P squad this year, and both that time was weird. Like Chicago wanted to sign me back to practice squad, but I was so mad. They had kind of like the year before, Pace had told me I was gonna be his guy. Like he thought. Like I had similarities to Drew Brees and was like super pumped in my future with Chicago. And then they signed Brian Hoyer. And I was like, okay. And we were rotating that off season. And then all of a sudden, literally an hour before we walk out to the 2016 training camp, they're like, hey, Hoyer's getting all the reps. Like you're rotating with Connor Shaw, who we signed last week. And I was just like, what the hell? And I think that goes back to like me not being a great practice player. Hoyer may be one of the best practice players I've ever seen. Like that dude drops dimes in practice and is smart. I mean, he was behind Brady for so long, like super smart. So it was like not a fair battle I was getting into on that one. But I was just mad. They wanted somebody to practice squad. I'm like I don't trust you. I don't want like. And Trustman was in Baltimore, and Trustman was like, "Hey, you'll be on P squad this year, and then you'll have an opportunity to compete for the 2 next year." And then I get there, Trustman gets fired like week 5. So I'm like, okay, now what's gonna happen? And so when I was getting cut those times, it was just a injury thing. They were like, "Hey, we're just gonna cut you for a couple of days, and we'll bring you back. We just got to move some people around." So that was it. And then Chicago had a bunch of injuries that year, and they ended up signing me back to the 53 to back up Barkley. But yeah, no, it's there's so many guys that are just up, down, and like whether if you're getting cut and then signed back, they're telling you probably like, we're gonna do this. Don't fly home. Especially if it's happening that fast, it's just moving people around. But yeah, when you're up and then gone for a month and then back and then up, it's tough.
Yeah, and it's something that we as fans don't really realize. We don't we don't follow all the roster moves from the practice squad and all that, and so we don't really see that. Again, we just see the guys that have been around for 10 years on the same team, and we're like, oh, great! Like everybody does that in the NFL, and it's like it's great, like and that's why I want to ask you for that perspective, because I think it gives us an opportunity to kind of see into what the NFL is like for a lot of players and a lot of players who are trying to make it. I want to ask, so you talk about Hoyer and how good he was in practice. I always hear, like, and not necessarily about Hoyer, but just in general with quarterbacks, is like, oh, this guy prepares a ton, or like this guy is really great at that one thing. When you're at that top level in the NFL, like how much separation is there really within some of those traits, like in terms of being prepared, like the difference between, let's say the best guy, best prepared guy in the NFL and like the least prepared guy in the NFL, like how big of a difference is that, like not only with, I guess, preparation, but then also talent and like all these different traits that we try to measure, like how big of a difference is there?
I think it's just a different style. You guys there, they know how to prepare. They're already good. They know how to prepare properly for them to go out and perform, and it's just different for all guys. Like I like Cutler, Stafford, like those 2 guys just now, like wicked smart, like photographic memory, have seen a lot of ball. And I'm not necessarily that way because obviously I didn't have the experience or reps, but I can retain stuff quickly, and I got it. But they just had, it was on another level just based on all their experience and stuff they've seen. But like Jimmy Clausen was huge for me because that guy is like OCD organized, and how he prepares, and like his routine was the same way. And I forgot who showed him, but my rookie year, he was the 2 and I was behind him. I was the 3. And just seeing how he would prepare for first second down, then third down and red zone, and how he would write everything down and organize his notes. I wasn't as OCD as that, but like just having that foundation for how to learn, just like learn a playbook and then learn and game plan weekly, was super helpful. But it, like, in terms of, is there like, oh, this guy does it, it's like, yeah, no, but like whether it separates you, no, because what ultimately matters is, do you go out and perform? Because like like Matt Moore, I was around in 2017, like just such an awesome guy, like super cool, super smart, just like a funny guy in the quarterback room, hilarious, in terms of as a backup. And you want to, like, I just watching him, and I don't know what he would say about himself, but watching him, it's like, give him the least amount of information possible and let him come in like mid second quarter, and the guy's going to give you a chance. Yes, him starting, he's going to overanalyze, over prepare, take in way too much information. And obviously, like he like the games I saw, he was going in against some tough teams like Baltimore, New England, at New England. Like, hey, those are some tough games. But like, just seeing him when he's going in at halftime or in the middle of a game and just says, like, he just straps it up and runs out there and like and he's gonna go drop a dime. It was fun watching him, and just but his mindset was so different. Like he was just a little kid during the week as a backup, and then like he kind of would get serious when he was a starter, like almost too serious. Like, yes, long story again, but I don't know. Like, yeah, everyone has a different style, but ultimately, like, nobody cares as long as you go out and perform. And it kind of looks different, like different for every guy. Not different for every guy, but there's just different personality types and how they retain information.
Two last questions for you, man, and then we'll finish off the pod with a little rapid fire thing, and then we'll let you go. First question, Deshaun touched on this a little bit, Deshaun Kaiser. Just like the conversations with management and the things behind the scenes that we as fans don't really see. Like your experience, you mentioned being mad the first time you were cut, and there's obviously a lot of emotion that happens, but just like the conversations with management, and you don't need to like single out any team or anything, but just like general 30,000 foot view, what those conversations are like. What are some of the like behind the scenes stuff that a lot of fans don't see in those types of deals?
Yeah, I don't know what those conversations are like for top tier guys, right? Like guys are about to pay. I'm sure they're super transparent because those are probably a lot of good conversation, good news. But when you're like a guy where they're trying to figure out if they're gonna keep you, if they're not, it kind of depends on who else is available, especially at like during the cut date. They're not very transparent, not very truthful. And I would say that's almost across the board on all my experiences. Gase and Dow Dow Loggins and Adam Gase were pretty transparent. But I had built a relationship with them, and I could just say like they knew that I knew. So it's like, hey, just tell me and I get it. But in terms of like guys upstairs who aren't in the locker room and not in the meeting rooms that are also weighing in on these conversations, I think there is such a disconnect in a lot of those. And that's why I think like Shanahan, Reed, some of these guys some of these coaches that have a lot of success is they have a lot of influence on the roster because they're around the roster. The teams where the coach might be like 30-70 or 40-60 on who's making decision on the roster, and it's guys upstairs who have no idea. And they just like the Jets when in 2019. And I'm fine saying this, but because I think everybody would agree. And like Le'Veon Bell was a great running back, but not a good fit in Adam Gase's offense. Like that's not Adam Gase. That's upstairs. That's somebody else making that call. And that's where I just feel like there's a disconnect sometimes, in terms of what the guys up there and their decision making and communication. There is typically zero communication, unless you have some prior relationship with them. But and you're probably a vet if you do have any relationship with them. But yeah, there's not very honest and too transparent, and like from their perspective, it's like it's not always in their interest to tell you that, like because they might not know, and breaking bad news is hard. Like I don't like telling somebody that they might not think you're good enough. That's not easy for people. Most people aren't that direct or able to, so it's not always easy.
It's interesting hearing that from you, man, because I feel like and I bring this up because, again, recently, Shanahan does have a lot of influence over the roster, especially when it comes to drafts. I think everybody knows that. Like, he has a say in who the Niners pick. Again, you mentioned Andy Reid, some of these other coaches who have more of a say in the roster. But it's funny because, like, as fans, like, there's recently been, like, this whole contingent of 49ers fans where they're like, hey, should Shanahan give up some of the influence that he has on the roster? Like, is that maybe a bad thing? Is it maybe bad to be too connected to the players? And it's like, but that, I think fans are saying that because they don't understand what the relationships are within the building between the players, the coach, the GM, the owner.
Then you guys have been good. Like, aren't you? I'd like to see the list of injuries you've had this year.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that.
yeah. That's you're not gonna be good. Like if you're half your team's hurt. And everyone goes through that, but I know they've had some key players go down, it's kind of like it's going to be tough. tough to win. And Shanahan has had some success. He's been good. Like I would not make any significant changes. If they're like, I'd give him 2 more years. Let him keep doing what he's doing. They got beat up this year. It happens. Like the NFL is hard. Like,
Yep.
and he's done a really good job. It's injuries and yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I would not take it away from him.
I've said like if he was a free agent right now, there would be at least 10 teams lining up right now willing to give him $500 million a year to come like the Bears right now. The Bears would offer him obscene amounts of money to come coach their team. Like obscene. Like
I think anybody who knows football would pay him. Like if you know your stuff, like and they know Shanahan, like yeah, they're gonna pay him. I would probably say it's probably more than 10.
Yeah, I agree. All right, David. One last question, and then we'll do the rapid fire segment and close this out. So I have to bring this up because we were laughing about it before we started recording. But you played in Miami. I live in Orlando. And so I've not only been down to Miami, but I'm very familiar with the Florida summers and how hot it can get. You talk about training camp in Florida and how that was an experience for you. The recent narrative around Miami teams, around Tua and this current, Miami offense and just Miami team in general, is that they can't play in cold weather games. We saw it against the Packers on Thanksgiving, losing yet another cold weather game. Having played in Miami and having experienced the heat and all that comes with it, how real do you think that narrative is?
Yeah, it's tough. And like we were talking about, like it's like going from cold to warm is nice. Like you can do that. You can go from Buffalo to Miami and you're like, oh wow, I'm faster here in December. You going from Miami to Buffalo? Oh, that you can't simulate that, and you can't practice that during the week. The hits hurt. You're stiffer. It has to. It has to. I think like there's just no way to avoid that. Like I always think it makes us soft. Like being in Florida in December and then playing in Buffalo. Because that's another day for them. It's a cold ass day for us, especially and a lot of these guys that are on the league, like they've played in cold weather games their whole career. Like even in college, like your majority guys, unless you're a West Coast, like me, I didn't play in too many cold games, but there was like Utah State, my military bowl, like so you're used to it, but sometimes like Packers, Buffalo, that's like cold you've never felt. And going from 80 to single digits negative, it's hard. It's hard. And it's hard. It's like hard to put a general statement like, yeah, everyone gets soft going from Florida to Buffalo or to cold weather games, but I would definitely say you're lying if you say it's not hard. Like Buffalo definitely has an advantage, or any of those colder teams coming there to us in December.
And then just the fun that you had in training camp in Miami during the summer.
Yeah. I liked it, except for getting under center, because all the linemen just drenched and like literally someone just put on all their pads, their pants, shorts, just dove into the pool and got out and like, yeah, let's take a snap. And that's how it'd be. And you'd put your hand under there and it's just wet. Don't smell your hand. It's not going to smell good. And then you hear their shoes and it's like, you see bubbles coming out the top. They'd have to bring another pair of shoes. They'd change their shorts halfway. You'd have to have a towel too on the back. Yeah, for the big guys, it's tough. Like, probably all of them are getting IVs, just like losing 10 plus pounds. I liked it just because, like, you could be standing there for 5 minutes and you're warm the whole time. Like your joints feel good. You don't have to warm up a lot. Like I just need to fill the ball a few times and I'm good. It does not take long to get warm. I did not mind it at all. Just the only thing is getting under center. Yeah, that was rough. Wash your hands after.
Takeaway from this podcast is wash your hands after you get under center if you're playing during the Florida summers.
Yeah. 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 It's rough.
All right. Well, now that we have that fresh in our minds, I think this is a good time to segue into the last little thing here. So I picked out three quarterbacks that you either played with or you were around in your career, and I was hoping we can do this rapid fire. I have kind of specific questions for each one, but again, we can do it rapid fire and then close out. First quarterback that I have picked out here is Kaepernick, and as a 49ers fan, I had to single him out. You were with him in Nevada. You saw him play up close. Do you ever think that Kaepernick would turn into what he ended up being in the NFL?
Uh, I didn't really know. I never even really thought about it. I remember the guy recruiting me at UNR telling me he was going to the NFL. He was like, "Yeah, he's gonna get drafted," and I was like, "Oh wow, okay." Not just being naive, not really knowing much, so I was like, "Oh, okay, he's good." I knew he was the man at UNR, like just walking around campus and obviously watching his games. Like he had some big games against Boise. I remember going to the San Jose State game where he waxed San Jose like 60-0, and he was so fast. Like just being there with him and watching him run, like it doesn't look fast, but when you stand next to him and he's just his long strides, like he's super fast, and he had a hose of an arm. Like at that time, the strongest arm I've ever been around. But I used to always think he only had one speed. I was like, a 5 yard out or a 30 yard out, I'm getting a piss missile, and I was like. I was just like, why, but okay. But I used to just think he had one pitch, but it was a pitch a lot of guys didn't have. It was a hose.
Yeah, that used to piss me off. So watching Kaepernick, especially like 2012, 13, even 14s, like Anquan Bolton would be running like a 5 yard slant, and Kaepernick would just fire that thing 100 miles an hour. And Bolton had great hands, so like he would always catch it, but there was receivers who didn't on the Niners at the time. So like it was the most frustrating thing watching him throw 100 mile an hour out route, like you said, and like the receiver drops it because it's like they just don't. They don't have time to react. Like
Yeah. No. Yeah, you gotta throw a catchable ball. But a lot of guys have arms. Like I was around Cutler. Tannehill has a hose too, but they like Cutler, Stafford, they got the balls that were cool to watch where I was like, oh wow, was the ones they feather it in an angle that you didn't see. They back shoulder a corner or something in the red zone. You're like, dang, like not many guys can do that or see that or throw it at that angle. Like the things Stafford does, like his arm angles, and the things he can anticipate and see. I'm like, whoa, that's cool.
speaking of Jay Cutler, the next quarterback on my list, lo and behold, was Jay Cutler. I remember when I was growing up and watching Jay Cutler. I remember reading that everybody would always say the narrative around Jay was like he doesn't care. He always seems like he's bored. He doesn't really care about winning. He's just out there throwing the ball. What was your experience with Jay and that narrative?
He definitely cares. The guy worked hard, put in a lot of effort, and like one of the smartest guys I'd been around. Like I'd be in there and like sometimes he's not taking notes, but then he would go out, and my first year it was him, Forte, Martellus Bennett, Zach Miller was a really good tight end who ended up getting hurt at Chicago, but he was the backup, and another really smart guy. And then at receiver they had Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Marquise Wilson, Santonio Holmes, who was kind of like at the end of his career, but like still another really good player. So like he would go out there and do things with B Marsh that like they didn't talk about, but they had just so much experience together. So he definitely cared, and it was something. I remember the next year, Gase and even Kavanaugh would try to work on like his communication style and body language and stuff. But that, like what I respected, it was like he was him all the time. Like you kind of knew how he was going to show up from that standpoint. But definitely cared. Definitely cared for sure. Worked hard, just like a freak talent. Like, yeah, not a lot of guys that are that fast, that big, that strong, that smart, kind of just, yeah, add everything.
Last but certainly not least, we touched on him a bit during this podcast, but Sam Darnold, he's having just a resurgent year with the Vikings. We talked about the effects of going to a team that has great weapons, who also happens to have a great coach, Kevin O'Connell, who has a great offensive system. You were with him during his time with the Jets, which obviously did not go as people maybe had hoped would go. But just your experience with Sam and some of the things that you were seeing during your time with the Jets.
Yeah, and that's where I think, like, when I think of we were just talking about evaluating quarterbacks and drafting them, and like, are they a bust? Are they not? I'm like, Sam could have definitely fallen into that. Like, had he not gone to the Niners, and I know he was a backup there, but like, just give him a year to just chill and not everybody critique him on whether he's like a bust or not, and then finally get into a good situation where Josh McCown is the quarterback coach who was his first vet he was around his rookie year, and knows him from a personality standpoint and how he learns and performs, and then Kevin O'Connell, who's just a wizard, and then he's on a good team. Like, and the Jets, I was like, man, like playing the quarterback position early in your career is so hard, and depending on what system you end up, like Gase's offense is not easy. I mean, this is Peyton Manning, like one of the smartest quarterback. That's this offense, and then it morphed into like a hybrid of Peyton Manning / Mike Martz, so it's even harder now, like, than what Peyton was doing. And Sam, who's 21, in his second year in the league, like, I don't care how talented you are, like, and how smart you are. Like, Joe Flacco was in that room and he's like, I'm not doing half this stuff. Like, Joe Flacco had his own plan because he just understands, like, I don't care as smart as I am to go out there and play against the best in the world at like a super fast pace. Like, you got to keep it simple. And Sam kind of he didn't have that experience yet to kind of make those calls and say, like, no, we're gonna keep it simple. And you kind of look like my year in 2019, the first 6 games were rough. There was a point like midway through the career or that season where we're like, we need to just call the simplest plays, keep it simple, and let Sam go make a play. Like, if they're gonna wire it, like, Sam will scramble and get somebody open. And then he had a lot of success the back half, and the schedule wasn't as hard, but like, we also made that mental shift in terms of how we were game planning for him. Cause it was a lot. Like, I was there saying, I'm like, this is Cutler isn't going to do this. You know, Flacco wasn't going to do this the next year. Like, they're going to keep it as simple as possible. And I think like, being as smart as Gase is sometimes a blessing and a curse, is because he was trying to get everybody wide open and put everybody in the perfect position. And sometimes you can just kind of make it a little bit harder because just the NFL is hard. Like, they're getting paid on the other side as well. So, that was just something I recognized. And even when he went to Carolina, and that was another hard place to play. Like, he had success when McCaffrey is, but look at how many quarterbacks have success when McCaffrey's healthy. Like, everyone, like almost everyone. Like, what's McCaffrey's win percentage? And like, regardless of the quarterback, it's pretty high. So like, yeah, I know he did well, and then kind of didn't finish as hot. And then, but when he went to Minnesota, I'm like, he's got ballers around him. Josh McCown's going to take care of him, and then Kevin O'Connell's going to put him in a good position to win. So I think, yeah, obviously, like, they signed him there for a reason because they knew that, and Josh McCown knew him. And if you spent time around him, like, again, he was a first round early pick for a reason, because he has got God's gift physically. Like, those first round pick guys look different. They can spin it. They're bigger. They're faster. Like, they are gifted. That's why they're a first round. So he has all that.
That's a good point, man. Because I wonder, like, how many. Because there's always like the fact, I forget the exact data points, but it's like, oh, X percentage of first round quarterbacks are busts. But I wonder, like, if all of those first round quarterbacks went to perfect situations, how many of those would actually end up being busts?
Yeah. Then, yeah. I think, again, like, some of them personality, like, there's guys that you could say, like, yeah, like, probably shouldn't have been a first round pick. And like, we knew this in college, like, was a freak talent, like, but personality wise, you're like, yeah, I could have saw that happening. Like that shouldn't have been a first round pick. But yeah, I think that all the time. Like there's so many good players that just end up in the wrong situation that either their opportunity gets cut short or they don't get an opportunity at all. And then there's guys who do end up in the right situation that are good. Like you're good. They're all good, but like their career gets extended because they ended up at the right time. And that's a lot of things. Like my career could have ended in college, like had I not been at the right spot, had not been prepared, with the right coaches around me. So that's just success in general. But, you see it a lot. The longer you're in the NFL, you just see a lot of guys that either don't get a chance or do. And you're like, how the hell, but it's just timing and right place.
Yeah, man. I think of Jane Daniels this year, even with Washington and Cliff Kingsbury, and running a college style offense, and how much that's helped Jaden. I mean, Jaden has all the talent in the world, but I'm sure that running Cliff's offense has helped him a ton transition, into the NFL. So I mean, like you said, plenty of examples of that. And just real quick as we end this, you talk about all the stuff that had to go right. Like I think back to like John Elway's career, and I had the author. He wrote Jason Cole wrote a biography on John Elway, which is like fantastic. Highly recommend. But he talks about Elway and how like in high school, like Elway, like his family lived up in Washington State, and he was on this team that like barely threw the ball. Like they would run it 40 times a game. Didn't get to showcase like any of his arm talent, any of the talent that he had. His family, by luck, moves to LA, gets on this team that is like a pass heavy, throws 40 times a game, and all of a sudden John Elway's putting on a show because he's on this team that emphasizes, the passing game. And like I always tell people, like if you want to watch like a high school player just absolutely tear it up, go watch John Elway highlights from high school, because he's like running around in the backfield, like dropping back 20 yards and just throwing darts, 60 yards out for touchdowns in like the back of the end zone. Like it's some of the most amazing high school highlights I've ever seen for a quarterback. But like, again, like kind of lucky, right? Like his family randomly moves to this high school that emphasizes the passing game, and all of a sudden John Elway is a top prospect. So to your point, a lot of stuff has to kind of fall your way to get to where you are.
Yeah, no, totally. And like, and some of those guys like John Elway, so he might have just had a longer journey, like Pat Mahomes too. Like they probably would end up in the NFL, but like when you get to that level, like there's just, it's not just you. There's so many other people and things that go into being the best in the world against the best. And like, yeah, like those guys that are just freak talents, like they're probably going to make it there, but were they going to be one of the best ever? I don't know. Maybe, that there was some other variables there. I don't know, but I just, being in it, I've seen so many guys get either just not the fair shake based on like their where they're at. Like Sam, like had he not ended up in Minnesota, it would have been like one of those guys that I would have thought of like just one of the super talented, like could be one of the stand up next to one of the best, but just didn't get in the right situation. And now like his story has changed because he's in a good spot, and I would imagine he's gonna get paid. So, but which couldn't happen to a better human. He's an awesome guy.
Success is a mysterious thing, man. We're coming up on an hour and a half. David, I can't thank you enough for your time. This has been a fantastic conversation, man. We got into a little bit of your journey, how you ended up in the NFL. We talked a lot about current state of NFL quarterbacks, some of the quarterbacks that you played with that are still playing today. And it's been an honor, man. Truly appreciate your time and for sticking with us here for the past hour and a half. But before we sign off, where can people find out more about you and follow along on your journey?
Yeah. Twitter is David Fales. I'm not too active on there. I need to be better. Instagram, I'm getting streaks of postings, but that's, Twitter is David Fales. And then my Instagram is Fales10. And that is where I would probably be majority of socially, where you'd be able to find me.
Has anyone ever made fun of, like your name? Like if you like throw an interception, they're like, "Oh, David Fails." Like, has anyone ever said that?
Dude, yeah, in like first, second grade, and I was like, you know what? Back then you didn't have IDs, it wasn't all over the internet and stuff, and so I would just tell everybody my middle name's Never, and they'd be like, "No way," and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." And then like some dickhead would say, "Oh, your middle name's Always," and I'm like, "No, it's never."
Oh man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's such like a second grade joke too. Like it's perfect.
Yeah. And then, so my wife, she would make shirts. I think in college that would say like David never fails, and it had like my number and stuff on the back. It was pretty cool.
Love it, man. All right, well, thanks again for your time, David. Really appreciate it. It's been an honor. And for those listening, go check out David on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and hope to talk again real soon, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you.